BR Proud presents a candid conversation on Black distrust of American medicine.
Statistics show that Black women are 3 to 4 times more likely to die during childbirth than any other race. Joining us now to talk more about this is Dr. Veronica Gillespie Bell. I want to make sure I get that in.
Thank you.
She is the medical director for the Perinatal Quality Collaborative. Good evening and thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
We talked before and I was saying how this is such an important conversation to have. Before we even get into the questions we already had prepared, we were talking and you were saying that this is such an issue even before COVID.
Oh yes, absolutely. We talk about COVID-19 and it being a pandemic and it's a public health crisis, and that is true, it is. But so is maternal mortality, and so is the disparity of deaths that we see amongst Black women nationally and here in Louisiana. That's a public health crisis as well.
Do you know why the rate is so high?
So there are so many factors that are contributing. My belief and looking at the data, implicit bias and structural racism are at the root. We know that even when we adjust for socioeconomic factors, looking at severe maternal morbidity, and morbidity is a precursor for mortality, that even when we adjust for socioeconomic factors, Black women, especially a Black woman with a college degree, is twice as likely to experience a severe maternal morbidity compared to a white woman with a high school education. Wow. So when we adjust for social determinants of health, which I'm not saying social determinants of health do factor into the outcomes, but even when we adjust for those social determinants of health, we still see a disparity in our outcomes. And so that points to the differences in how we deliver care. And those differences in how we deliver care are related to our implicit bias.
You're watching a BR Proud presentation, a candid conversation on toxic times, legacy of environmental racism.
Have you ever thought about what you see when you look out your back door? People living in St. James Parish believe what they see is harming them. They live in an area that was once known as plantation country. Now they say it's the petrochemical corridor, keeping them just as disenfranchised as their slave ancestors. And they're determined not to give up their fight. Nestled along the banks of the mighty Mississippi River, just about 40 miles south of Baton Rouge, is St. James Parish.
We had everything in St. James. We were living a life of Raleigh. We had everything. We had pecan trees. We had fruit trees. We plant gardens.
Sharon Levine is a lifelong resident.
We can't do that anymore. Our pecan trees, they barely bear. Our fruit trees die. Whenever we plant the fruit trees, they die.
Levine spent more than 30 years in the classroom as a teacher in St. James. Now, her mission is to help educate the world about what she believes is the very thing killing the only home she's ever known.
The emissions from all these chemical plants are killing our trees. You know, if they're killing the trees, they're killing us too. So this is home. There's no place like home. And this is where we want to stay.
Levine is the founder and president of Rise St. James, an organization formed in 2018 after Formosa Plastics Group announced they had selected St. James Parish to build their $9.4 billion manufacturing complex.
They need to stop permitting all these chemical plants to come into Louisiana, especially in St. James in the 5th District. Put it in their community if it's so good and they want to be polluted, put it in their community. Don't put it in St. James. We are tired and we're not taking anymore.
Formosa is permitted to emit more than 800 tons of hazardous air pollutants each year, which the Centers for Biological Diversity says doubles the emissions in St. James and more than triples the levels of cancer-causing chemicals in the region.
Candid conversations, breaking barriers of Black mental illness.
Why do people still carry the negative response or the negative connotation to mental health as it pertains to the legacy of slavery?
So one of the reasons why people will hold stigma about having mental health consequences of racism and of slavery is because our educational system has often diluted the realities of what enslavement was. And as long as we have history books and social studies books that give it one sentence that say they were slaves and they were happy and then they were free and now they can be even happier, right? When we have that simplistic view, it does not make sense that it would have the sting and the consequence that it has.